little bit of a taste. Joe Biden was at a rally in Michigan. And I should say it's a taste insofar as I don't think we're going to see too many of these rallies, frankly. It's the NAFTA one. Oh, sorry. And Joe Biden at a rally in Michigan, and this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem because Donald Trump is going to run to the left of Joe Biden on trade. Now, is it justified? The answer is no. Donald Trump has no, position in this way. He's had to bail out. His stupid trade wars have hurt people, bailed out farmers. But the USMCA, Amy Klobuchar voted for it. It's an upgrade on NAFTA because NAFTA was garbage. Is it a significant upgrade? No. But Donald Trump is going to say, my plan's better than your plan, Joe. You supported NAFTA. Here's a protester. Here's some protesters in Michigan. NAFTA killed our jobs. And he's saying it's not a Trump rally. Now, is he saying, don't attack him? Or is he saying that we shouldn't have protesters? Saying don't attack him.
Yeah, at one point, I don't know if it's in, I don't think it's in either one of these, but he calls them Bernie bros, too.
Why did you vote for NAFTA? Why did you say black people can't read?
There you go. This is a problem. Obviously the protesters aren't, that's the protester or the protester, but this is going to be a problem with Donald Trump. And they're going to target Michigan voters, and they're going to talk about Joe Biden's support for NAFTA. And he was incredibly supportive of NAFTA. Here is our good friend Matt Binder, the podcast Doomed, writer for Mashable, producer emeritus at the Majority Report. Put together a little, this is almost like, sort of like Coppola in The Godfather, where they cut back and forth, right? Between the baptism and the taking out of all the other, cleaning up all the business. Here, Matt Binder cuts back and forth between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden back in 1993. I remember the days when we were debating NAFTA.
Mr. Speaker, corporate America and the big money interests have told us that NAFTA is a good deal. I don't believe them.
I quite frankly think that both the arguments for and against NAFTA are vastly overblown.
NAFTA may be a good deal for the people who own our corporations, but it is a bad deal for American workers, for our family farmers, and it is bad for the environment.
I see it in the end that 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now, we're going to look down at this issue, and in terms of the context in which it's being debated about creating jobs or losing jobs, this is essentially going to be a wash.
This NAFTA agreement should be defeated.
Those of us who support NAFTA, and I am announcing my support for NAFTA.
The American worker and family farmer should not be asked to compete against the desperate people of Mexico who are forced to work for a minimum wage of 58 cents an hour and an average manufacturing wage of $2.35 an hour.
I'm supporting NAFTA because I think it is a positive thing to do, but not because I think it's going to cure the workers' fears who have legitimate reason to be concerned.
A Wall Street Journal poll of last year has already told us, that 40% of the CEOs who were polled said that they are prepared to move manufacturing down to Mexico, 40% if NAFTA were approved, and 24% that said that they would use NAFTA to lower wages.
It will not exacerbate their concerns. It will not exacerbate their circumstance.
I regard it as an outrage that American taxpayers, some of whom have already been thrown out on the streets by American corporations going to Mexico, are now going to be asked to pay higher taxes to clean up the toxic waste caused by American companies that have gone to Mexico. Let the companies clean up their waste, not the American taxpayers.
These people have fear whether they'll be able to pay their mortgage. NAFTA will not fix it. NAFTA will not hurt it.
Mr. Speaker, let us defeat this NAFTA.
Let's see. Joe said specifically 2, 5, 10 years from now. This was in 1993. We're not going to see any difference in terms of jobs. Now, according to the EPI, back in 2003, this was written in 2003, 10 years after the fateful words, NAFTA-related job losses have piled up since 1993. There were almost 900,000 jobs lost. This is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 900,000 jobs lost as a function of NAFTA. There are others who suggest that it was even more. That it was 3 times that. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics say it was almost a million jobs. Now, that's just like the obvious impact to our job market. I don't think that probably keeps in mind like what it did to Mexicans who were driven from Mexican campesinos who were driven from their farms into the cities to get low-wage jobs there because corn that was brought in from the United States cost half the price that corn grown in Mexico cost.
Half the nutrition, too.
And probably a lot less nutritious because of the way that we produce it.
It was bad for workers all over the place.
We never got the environmental or labor protections that were promised as part of that. So Joe was right on one side of it, wrong on the other. In other words, it wasn't going to have the good impact that he said it did. He just was wrong on the bad impact. You know, for a guy who keeps talking about judgment, maybe there was a bigger bill to vote on about trade over the past 25 years, but I don't know what it was. There certainly wasn't a bigger thing to vote on than the Iraq war authorization within 50 years. I mean, I don't know. There may be other things when we talk about judgment. I'm not sure what it was with Joe Biden. Oh, Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas. That was not very good judgment to basically keep 3 women who could have substantiated at least part of what Anita Hill was saying from testifying.
Yeah, and installing an anti-choice justice on the Supreme Court in the process.
Allowing that to go forward, yes. Bad judgment. I think bad judgment.
I think he's saying judgment in the sort of Kissinger sense in that I know powerful people and people who know secrets and you don't. So regardless of what arguments this person can make, I am the person on the
I
inside.
have the secret information that says that I actually know what I'm talking about, but I can't tell you.
Was he comparing the protesters protesting against NAFTA to Trump protesters?
I think he was telling people don't go after them. This is not a Bernie rally.
Well, that's nice. I wouldn't have been
Trump rally.
surprised if he had, though, because like it's hard to say even nowadays what's left and what's right on trade, because the anti-globalization movement of the late 90s was very much a leftist movement. But since then, the majority of the anti-globalization sentiment around the world has been co-opted by the far right. So we have this weird situation where we have left parties and right parties both responding to dissatisfaction with globalization, but they have very different solutions. I'm wondering what...
I'd argue they also have different definitions of what globalization means.
That too. But like they're taking advantage of the problems caused by globalization and applying their own definitions to it and shaping people's understanding of it in a way that benefits them politically. And I'm not convinced that there is a good left populist answer on trade within the logic of our current system, but I think there are certainly better ones. I'm curious to get your take on it.
On what kind of trade regime that I would support?
Because like both Trump and Bernie support a certain kind of protectionism and economic nationalism, but I think Bernie's is better and Trump's is obviously fatuous.
I mean, to the extent that I would be protectionist, it would be through essentially requiring benchmarks for labor and environmental standards. And I would allow for, I mean, like the investor dispute, that was the best thing about the USMCA that got rid of that investor state dispute resolution system, which was problematic. That was basically exacting a cost from countries, states, I don't know if it went down to municipalities, trying to sort of just regulate as to what happens there in terms of trade. I mean, broadly speaking, I don't know that I would have tariffs, but I would impose the protectionism by creating benchmarks that must be achieved in terms of environmental and labor standards. And then I would make it harder for corporations to move their production. And I mean, part of it is not necessarily a function of would work out to be trade policy, but on some of it, it's also sort of like, I do think that we should have, controls and have the ability to produce some things that are important to our national security. And by the national security, I'm saying that broadly, not a militarized one, but like the ability to provide medicine for people.
I think the problem is like globalization came to mean labor arbitrage, and what it really needs to be is international standards.
Yes.